Do I just advance here?
All right. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with us. Can folks on the phone hear us and see the screen?
Yes, we can.
All right, thanks, Russ.
Yes.
Okay, well, I know we're getting late started, so I'm going to turn it over to Jody and Megan right away. But thank you all for coming. This is the first of our mixed methods seminar series. We're really excited. We have 6 seminars planned throughout the next 6 months, so we hope you keep coming back. And just a couple notes to please sign in and please complete our evaluation at the end of today. So without any further ado, here's Jody.
Hi, I'm Jody Woldruff. I work for Accords as part of the Dissemination and Implementation Research team. And I'm also an associate professor over in family medicine. Megan Morris. I am also at Accords. I'm the director of the Qualitative Research Core, and I'm an assistant professor in the Colorado School of Public Health. So today, I'm going to give an overview, and I don't think this presentation will take the entire time, so hopefully we'll have some time at the end. I'm going to start off and go through about half, and then Megan's going to pick up and finish the other half. So, so this part is an overview. Okay, it didn't move. Okay, so I got to do that. Okay, what do you push that?
Yep.
Okay, so the questions we hope to answer for today, and by the way, given that we're getting a little bit of a late start, if you have clarifying questions throughout, feel free to ask, but otherwise, if you have more in-depth questions, let's save it till the end, we should have time. So what we'd like to go through within before 1 o'clock is what are qualitative and mixed methods, what are mixed methods versus multi-methods, when do you use mixed methods? What are the main mixed methods designs? We're going to go through 4. There's a lot of iterations after that, but we're going to go through 4. And what are considerations in deciding to use mixed methods? So, how many of you do qualitative work? How many of you do quantitative work? How many of you do both? Oh, you guys are just know this already. So very, very quickly. Some of you didn't raise your hand on some of these things. So very, very quickly. Quantitative data, very, very brief review, involves numbers, explains outcomes, often tries to represent populations, tests theories or outcomes, examines relationships between variables, and involves data collection methods like pulling numbers and clinical values and numbers of encounters, types of encounters, those kinds of things out of clinical data systems like an electronic medical or health record. Surveys with scales on them, with numbers. How well do you like this? 1 to 5, whatever. That's quantitative data. And then other quantifiable information. We often use statistics or other types of math to analyze this data. So, now you know. Okay, qualitative, very brief overview. Involves words, explains meaning and understanding of things, describes context and experiences, and is not necessarily trying to represent a population, okay? It involves data collection methods, our favorites that we hear lots about, our interviews and focus groups. There are many other methods, such as watching people, recording what people do, reviewing documents with text, and other types of things like photo, etc. But we're not getting into that. So it involves analysis that sorts and represents meaning and may use theory to inform analysis. So we wanted to go through that just to kind of be on the same page what we're talking about. Okay. So we also just want to make the point of multi versus mixed methods. So a lot of people confuse this, and maybe the implications of QBising it aren't that great, but multi-methods means you're using more than one method. You can use multi-quantitative methods, multi-qualitative methods, or some quantitative and qualitative, but they're not integrated together. So mixed methods means you're using qualitative and quantitative, but you're integrating and mixing the data from both in some way. So that's what makes the mixed different than the multi. Add anything to that? So when you use mixed methods versus multi-methods, it really just depends on your study question. But some reasons why you might is to gain multiple perspectives to enhance the meaning of the results. So you draw out those weights out of the EMR. Well, what does that mean? It only tells you what the weights are. So maybe you want to learn a little bit more about that. Or you look at the responses to a survey and people give it a 3. Well, what does that mean? Okay, so mixing the methods gives you a little bit more information. It will help you with contextual information, gain a more complex understanding of a problem, help you to compare, validate, or triangulate results, and examine the process and experience with the outcome of the study. So consider mixed methods when you are studying people in their own settings, not like a controlled lab setting. And I work in D&I, and I think it'd be really, really hard to do a D&I study without mixed methods because there's so many different things going on that you really want to understand and have a good handle on what's happening, and mixed methods really helps you with that. All right, so we're going to go through 4 designs. I'm going to go through 2, and then Megan's going to pick it up with the last 2. So we're going to start first with an exploratory sequential. Anyone ever heard of this? Okay, so this is where you do qualitative data collection first. You analyze that to inform quantitative data, and then you interpret the connected results. So you're using both of them. It's just you're doing one first and then another. So the exploratory, you're exploring something, so you do the qualitative first. All right? So the goal here is to explore a problem through qualitative methods and analysis, and then you're using the results to develop something quantitative, either an intervention or an instrument, something like that. So you guys kind of know this already, I'm sure. It's just putting the words around it if you're not familiar with the words. So this is useful when you want to develop an intervention or instrument based on understanding the population or circumstances. Instead of just going out and saying, oh, you look like you would like it like this. You actually ask people and say, what do you think? How would that work? So you're using qualitative to inform the quantitative. So say you're going to develop the DPP, stands for Diabetes Prevention Program, and you want to adapt the program for a new group of participants. You might do some qualitative work to inform how you would adapt your program. Okay, so that's an example. So some benefits of this, I took some of these out of some reading, so they're not always going to apply to every situation, but it can minimize participant burden within a particular time frame. It could be useful for understanding adoption issues before an early intervention, before the quantitative data is collected. It can be used for instrument development and may result, this is the most important thing, in a more appropriate intervention, stakeholder-informed intervention. So those are also good things. Some drawbacks is that it can take a little bit more time because there's this built-in phase to learn and develop. And since the first phase is qualitative, you run the risk that the second phase requires major modification or even a different intervention. And Natalie and I were just talking about this before we came to this meeting, is how do you do this in a proposal when your second aim determines, like your first aim is qualitative and you're doing this exploratory work, but you're not really sure what you're going to find. And she gave the example. No, was it you I was talking to? I'm trying to remember. You, yeah, okay. I talked to her and then I talked to her. So anyway, but that what if you're doing exploratory work about developing an app or something, and then people say, I don't like the app, I don't want an app. And your second aim is to develop an app. So that's where you can kind of get into some trouble. But ideally, it's good. Okay, so another sequential design is the explanatory. So when you have quantitative results and you want to explain what they mean, then you'd follow up with qualitative. So if you were only going to do quantitative and only going to do qualitative to inform, and you don't do the interpretation at the end, it might technically be multi-method rather than mixed methods. We discussed this morning. And it seems like the key of mixing is that you actually are doing them together at the end. But we were saying it might be really difficult to do this, like you do your quantitative and then your qualitative, and it's not like you're going to forget what happened in the quantitative. You know, it's still going to be in your head. So technically, that's going to be pretty easy to do. So the goal is that you're trying to explain what you got in your quantitative results.
Jody, can I ask you?
Yeah.
So for exploratory sequential, is it always qualitative followed by quantitative, or can it be both directions?
Well, it depends if you start doing multi-phase studies, and then that becomes called something else. But technically, exploratory is always qualitative first before quantitative, and explanatory is quantitative first followed by qualitative. But then, so we're only giving you the 4 basics types. Then it starts getting, you could do exploratory, then an intervention, then explanatory, and then more qualitative, and then, you know, on and on. So we're just sticking with the basics first. Did I answer?
Yes.
Okay.
Speaking too fast. One way to determine if it's exploratory versus explanatory is just to think about your relationship or the qualitative. So it's really the qualitative is going to help explain, or qualitative is going to help explore.
Right. Yeah.
Right, it's this language that a lot of
You know, you can certainly write a proposal. Yeah, the question is, our grant reviewers looking for this language. If you're sure which design you have, it probably would be a benefit to use the language to explain it so that they can read it when you do your overview. Oh, this is what I'm looking for and why. Why you picked that design. It sounds like you know what you're doing a little bit more. I've written proposals and seen proposals where people don't use the descriptive language. They just say what they're doing and they don't call it anything. I don't know. Does anyone know the implications of that? Okay.
Might it depend on your funding mechanism in the study section and how sophisticated they are with understanding mixed methods themselves?
Right.
Sometimes you don't know that until after. Sometimes it's trying to get another talk, but that answers my question.
I mean, I personally like using the terms to explain what you're doing and why you're doing it in an overview section. I found that useful. But okay, so the explanatory sequential, what you might want to do is use it when you want to explain your results, why, how, etc. For example, we're using the diabetes prevention program as an example. So you do the intervention and you see people who lost weight and did not lose weight, and then you might pick them out and see who participated and then ask them about their experiences. You know, purposefully select based on their results, and then examine themes for success within those population. So some benefits, again, similar to the other sequential design, but the design is data-driven and emergent, minimizes participant burden within the time frame, can be used for maintenance exploration, so if you're looking at why maybe results are sustained or not on an individual level or an organizational level, that might be helpful. And it's appealing to quantitative-driven researchers. If you're kind of like, the main thing is to do the quantitative, but we also want to learn a little. So some drawbacks, again, the timing of when to do this, how far you wait out to do qualitative work. It can be time consuming because it's sequential. You're doing one phase and then the next phase is dependent on the phase that happened before. Requires quantitative results who are partially completed. So you need to know what you found. Potential for recall bias or loss of participants. So if you're waiting a while before you interview people or etc., they might forget. Quantitative results can contradict the qualitative results can contradict the quantitative results. So what if your quantitative results say one thing, you analyze that, and then you go out to try to understand it, and you know you learn something totally different. So it might be interesting, but anyway, try to figure out what to do there. And it can be difficult to fully plan the qualitative arm since it's dependent on the results of the quantitative. So I think it's Megan's turn.
All right, so we're going to switch gears and talk about two study designs. The first one is the concurrent or convergent parallel. And so this is one where you do both qualitative and quantitative in parallel. And then you collect it and analyze it, and then you kind of compare and contrast the results and do your interpretation there. So the goal is to have the qualitative and quantitative to really inform each other. So I think of these as sort of your goal of your project is kind of equally qualitative, equally quantitative. And again, you're using both to really paint this kind of more complex picture of what's going on in your study. And so you really want to think about how are both qualitative and quantitative informing each other. So when you might use this is when you want to see, again, are you doing this intervention, and you might want to collect qualitative kind of along the way, and so that you get this really real-time feedback of how your intervention is going. You might want to do this if you have timing issues, if you are thinking, this kind of phased approach is going to be really difficult with the time of our grant. We only have a year to do this, or 2 years, and it's not going to be appropriate and feasible to do a two-phase process. And if you do not want to influence or the results influenced by the data collection, again, because you're doing it at the same time. So, so we have another example from the TPP program is, again, if you are you're doing your intervention, you're interviewing your clinicians along the way, and your staff, and then also you are collecting fidelity measures or doing some observations with Likert scales to understand, and that's kind of your quantitative outcomes of the study. So, and one thing we talked about, Jody and I talked about earlier, is that your participants may or may not be the same in both your qualitative and quantitative. So, for example, you might be doing a study. So I did a study where we surveyed patients and then we interviewed providers and staff, and we kind of did it simultaneously, and then again analyzed and then compared, contrasted, and integrated the results to again give more broad picture. But you could do it where you are your participants for both qualitative and quantitative are the same populations. Does that make sense? So when might you, what are some of the benefits? Again, this timing issue is you're doing it at the same time, so you don't have to worry about the phased approach. And then you get this, again, real-time feedback on your intervention or your study. And it can also, big issue here is recall bias. You're interviewing people or you're talking or doing observations as you're going throughout, again, an intervention, so you're not waiting until the very end to understand people's perceptions of what went well and what didn't go well. Some drawbacks or challenges is that sometimes the data just might not seamlessly go together. They have, quantitative is telling one picture and qualitative is telling a very different picture. So you need to think about, okay, how are you going to really make sense of this data and merge them together? And then you do run the risk of potentially influencing your project as you're going along. So, for example, if you're doing a quantitative intervention and particular dissemination implementation project, and you are going in and collecting qualitative along the way. Yeah, kind of touch point in the middle of your project might be actually a trigger to your participants to remind them of, oh yeah, we have this intervention. Maybe I need to, adhere to my protocol better. And so there's the potential that, again, your qualitative data could influence your quantitative intervention and vice versa.
Right.
Yes.
Is it the data collection process that it can be the issue, not the data itself? So it's that the act of interviewing someone is the problem?
Yes, so the question is it the data collection process itself or the results? I would say potentially it could be both, and one might be a little bit more meaningful or like purposeful than the other. So you can, yes, interviewing someone might change that person's behavior. But you also have the other side. So again, especially in qualitative, we're sort of analyzing along the way, and that actually you might use that. I was doing a mixed methods intervention study, and we got halfway through and we're doing our interviews, and the intervention was going horribly, and people were miserable, the nurses in that study. And so we actually use that qualitative to actually adjust the intervention, the quantitative intervention a bit. And so then we had to, again, when we got to the end and we were describing our results, we had to talk about it in conjunction with each other, because that qualitative really helped inform the quantitative, again, along the way. All right, so next we're going to move to embedded, and this can be a little confusing trying to differentiate between the concurrent and the embedded. So really what an embedded is you have kind of this bigger project going on, and it can be quantitative or qualitative, and then you kind of do sort of a secondary quantitative or qualitative. So again, the goal is that you have this primary data collection method and you have this secondary method that you're using kind of in conjunction along the way, right? So again, like the concurrent, you would use this if you want to see how the intervention is going along the way. And again, this can be qualitative or quantitative as sort of the primary. And our example here is that you might be rolling out this diabetes prevention program, and you decide to kind of interview a subset of the patients along the way to understand their experiences participating. All right, so these benefits and drawbacks are very similar to our concurrent. The benefits, again, you're doing these simultaneously, so you don't have that gaze issue with the explanatory and exploratory sequentials. You decrease recall bias, and allows for a more in-depth exploration kind of while the intervention is going along. Some drawbacks is, again, very similar. One can affect the other, and it can cause often. So this we were talking about also earlier is that this you would really in an embedded really use the same population that, again, let's say your main is a quantitative study, you're going to interview or do observations of the same participants in an embedded design, and that might be just extra burden on your research participants, so something to consider. And then there's challenges of determining the timing of when you're going to go in and do this sort of secondary data collection. All right, so those are the four major designs that we're going to talk about today. They can get a lot more complicated. You can mix and match, and this is going to your question, Mandy, about grant reviewers. I would say that can be get a little bit messy, I think, if you get really, you can merge these two different designs, and that might make it get a little confusing with grant applications, but I would encourage, if you're going to use, especially kind of these major designs, to think about including it in an application. But again, we're not going to cover those, but there are resources out there that talk about how to get more complex. All right, so what do you need to think about when you are deciding to embark on a mixed methods research project? So first and foremost, of course, is your research question. Think about your research question and really use that to really inform which of these designs. So I would not go out and, I see this sometimes, people want to pick their designs and make your research question match that, but really think about what is your research design or research question, and how is that, and which design of these 4 designs we talked about is really going to map on nicely to your research question. Another piece is to think about the time you have. Again, there's going to be this, especially with those sequential, it's difficult with trying to plan out how long, especially if you're qualitative, maybe that takes longer than you expect, and how is that going to kind of push off your quantitative. And maybe you need to think about perhaps a more concurrent type of design, and what does that do to your research question. You also need to think about your resources. In particular, this goes into the expertise of your team. So, just because you have maybe a qualitative person on your team and a quantitative person on your team, that does not necessarily mean that they know how to work together and to think about how to integrate the mixed method. So again, going back to that multi-method versus a mixed method. So you really need to think about, as a team, as you begin your project, of what expertise do we have, and how are we as a team going to work together to be integrating the qualitative and quantitative results, and using one to inform the other. Oftentimes I have seen, it's sort of this kind of last second, oh yeah, we need to think about how do we put these together, or there's some sort of bias of, well, we don't want that qualitative data, I'm biased, qualitative data like mudding up our quantitative beautiful results. So just, again, think about how you as a team are going to be very purposeful in using one to inform the other, and even thinking about how is that going to translate to manuscripts, or how the team is going to talk about the results, right? And then where are you in the exploration of your study topic? What's the next logical step? So maybe you really want to do a concurrent, but realize that you really need to do that exploratory work first, to really think about, to gather that information from your stakeholders, your research participants, before you really move on to that second phase. So that brings us to the end of our slides, but we, like Jody mentioned, we really wanted to leave plenty of time, plenty of time to ask questions, because it's one thing to really kind of go through these designs, but sometimes when you go to apply these, it gets a little or a lot messier in real life. So, questions? Just share.
Do you guys want to repeat questions, or should I run this?
Do you have any questions?
Yeah.
When Allie and I were just talking about this morning, now I'm trying to decide whether it fits one of these mixed methods at all or not. But we were talking about trying to understand what works in communication between primary care providers and nurses in the nurse-family partnership. And we're pretty sure that in a lot of sites for the NFP, there's not really a lot of communication between those two groups occurring. So it's gonna be hard to figure out what works if it's not happening, right? And so we talked about doing an initial kind of closed-ended survey to try to get a sense of, a quantitative sense of whether any communication is actually happening. And then find those sites where communication is happening and do more qualitative methods, right? Trying to understand what works. And so it's really using that survey, which is it's not like a super deep quantitative thing, right? To identify a population.
So what would your outcomes be? So this was a really long question to repeat.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I
thought it was mainly a qualitative.
Yeah, so if you want to do a survey first, or looking to do maybe some kind of case finding around occurrences where communication happens, and you end up with like quantitative numbers around how often they talk, and then do some qualitative work once you do the finding people who actually talk. Is that kind of right?
Yes. Yes.
Well, I mean, technically that would be an explanatory study, I guess, because you're quantitative versus qualitative, but the idea is that you want to connect them together. One would inform the next. So you would do the quantitative data, not just for the case finding, but you'd also try to understand something about that, analyze that, then it would inform the questions you would ask in interviews or whatever. Like,
And
so
I guess that's my question, is it even really an explanatory sequential study, or is it just
kind of case finding?
or is it just kind of case finding, it's really a qualitative study? Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah. I mean,
Which I'm fine with too, I just don't know if it's mixed methods or not technically. I just thought it'd be a good example for where you can get money.
yeah, so is this really mixed methods? I mean, if you're generating quantitative data of some sort, you're analyzing that, and then that is informing what you're doing qualitatively, and then you consider them both together in the end, it is mixed methods in my opinion.
And if it's multi-methods, it's not
It's fine.
Right?
That's
it's
fine.
totally fine.
It's just,
It's more of an issue of trying, like, I give this example, I was once in a committee and someone asked the group, oh, who does mixed methods? And someone raised their hand and said, oh, I once did a qualitative project, so therefore I mixed methods. And that's what we're trying to move away from, is that it's really this meaningful. And if you are going to use, again, the quantitative, the survey results, even though they are exploratory, because you're trying to understand what's going on, but if you're using that to then kind of inform the second phase, like you're going to say, oh, in the survey we found this subpopulation had some more issues than other groups, so let's do interviews with them, then I definitely would say that that's a mixed methods. And again, I think going back to your question before about grantsmanship, I mean, I think that would actually, I think, help inform the reviewer of, again, having them see why one is linking to another. And I think it would help the reviewer kind of see that entire picture. So I think then there would be an advantage to call it a mixed methods, because it's helping explain what you're doing.
Mark, I'm going to pick on you sitting back there, but I was just thinking to contrast this with our study right now, because we're looking through Medicare data to identify practices, providers, and practices who use a particular payment code. We're not really analyzing, like we're not really generating and analyzing the quantitative data, but we're just using it for case finding. So I'm not sure I would call that mixed methods, but if you're generating quantitative data through doing a survey, where you're getting numbers of different types of things, what are you thinking? Does that seem?
Well, ours is not what I would call mixed methods.
Right.
I have seen it done in very structured surveys upfront, identify areas of ambiguity, and then you do qualitative work following up
Right.
to really answer the questions of the
We're gonna do roving mic now because it's really hard to repeat comments that people, so Mark essentially said that was kind of Marky's finding, not necessarily mixed methods, so.
And just to discuss this point further, I think there's no way that we're not going to use that we're not going to use the quantitative data to inform the qualitative, because even though we're going to identify outliers, as it were, we're going to sort of look at the spectrum of how much communication is going on, which will set the stage for the questions in the qualitative. So I think you're good. I'm going with yes.
You could tell I have a proposal right now thinking about this, right? So what word should I use?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good question is when you label it in a proposal. I just wouldn't get it wrong. If you do use a label and then use a wrong label, then there's going to be an institute reviewer that's going to go, that's not what that is. Even then, you're going to get reviewers also that are not so astute and they think they know, and then you are right and they are wrong, which happens. So, but I would generally advocate just have other people look at it and make sure that they agree that that's an accurate description. What other?
Thank you for this presentation. I'm Heather, president of the College of Nursing. I'm just wondering, because I'm familiar with Creswell, right, if you have any other references to cite when you're doing your grant to say Creswell, this one, this one, this one, from where this information comes from. And sorry to put you on the spot on top of your head.
No, I mean, Creswell is who I use. He's kind of the main mixed methods person that's defined all of these. He's got a number of textbooks. A lot of people work with him. Like Julie just went to training program on mixed methods at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Mike Fetters does a lot of mixed methods work. Dr. Ivankova.
She's great.
Okay, but I mean, Creswell is kind of the main person. There's a lot of different books. The right sitting next to you is a book that I'm using for class I'm teaching right now that it probably references Creswell. There's one chapter, the reason I like that book is it talks mostly about writing a mixed methods proposal, not just what the different mixed methods are. It doesn't go into a ton of depth about the different designs for mixed methods. It gives you some, but I think they're probably, I'd have to look at it, but they're probably referencing Creswell as well. But I would also reference studies that are in your area and why they pick certain kinds of designs and, that kind of thing, along with, I mean, the whole proposal has to be, needs to make sense together. You can't just plop in we're just doing this design and then never talk about it again. You talk about why you picked that design, how it's informing the questions you have, how it fits with your study topic, et cetera, so it doesn't look like this chunk just put in there. So did I answer? You have more?
And we have a question from Russ.
Yeah.
Russ, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks. I apologize if you covered this. I had to step out for a few minutes before. But the timing you mentioned, how long this can take, or the turnaround, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts or there are any particular methods that can be used real rapidly to kind of inform possible adjustments to a project as you're going along.
I mean, I have some ideas.
So he's asking about rapid. I mean, to me, the first thing, Russ, you asked, save all the easy questions. So, to me, a lot of it has to do with the resources that you have to get it done, at a certain amount, and then what amount of quality, degree of quality you want with that. I'm not an expert on like rapid assessment protocols that are a little bit more quality improvement-ish kind of seeming to me. But what I find is that the reason you get stuck is that it takes a while to analyze the data thoroughly, and then that is what takes so long. So you can get the data collected pretty quickly, maybe, especially if you don't have like a lot of interviews or a lot of that kind of thing. But once you get it transcribed and then you get it into your qualitative software program and then analyze and then to kind of make sure it's really right, it just takes a long time. It takes way too long. So are there quicker ways that you could kind of get to your accurate results faster, probably, but maybe not as thoroughly. So I don't know. Am I getting anywhere near what you're actually asking?
Yeah, you did, and maybe I'm asking something that's impossible, but it's precisely because of the analyses. And I think that's probably the same thing is true of quantitative assessment methods is, you can get a survey out or whatever quickly, but then making sense out of them and summarizing and integrating and doing the analyses appropriately can take a while. I guess in an ideal world, it would be, but from my perspective, really neat use of mixed methods if you could use these on an ongoing iterative basis back and forth, use quantitative and qualitative to then inform the next round that you're going to do, rather than just be, all an initial, assessment, form of assessment, and then you're done, or then a final assessment that, 2 years or 4 years later you get something.
Yeah, I'll just say something and then Megan wants to answer. So I guess I just think you can just kind of repeat these phases, and then it's like a multi-phase for time series design. So we didn't get into that, but you can kind of keep doing these phases. My experience has been with quantitative results, like developing surveys and getting, that a lot of that takes more work upfront, and then once you have your data, it does take a little time to clean it, but then you've got your results. It's like faster on the other end. Whereas the qualitative is faster on the front end, because if you've got like open-ended questions, but then you've got to sort through all the data, and the analysis takes a lot after you get your data. So that's where it kind of gets really stuck and taking too long afterwards. That's just my experience. So you can kind of have repeating cycles. So maybe the way to do this faster would be just analyze subsets of your data, do that, faster, but I don't know if your whole data set would resemble a smaller data set, but that might be one idea. I've never done it.
One thing I've done with projects, and in particular one is, I think it comes back down to your team and really being purposeful as you're moving forward. If you are having regular team meetings where you talk about the qualitative and quantitative, and just speaking from the qualitative perspective, I also think, especially if you have like multiple people collecting qualitative data along the way, this is where taking field notes, so kind of writing what you're hearing, and you're bringing that back to the team. So any red flags or anything that's going really well, you're able to kind of pick up more immediate. And yes, you're not going to have that full-blown coded, analyzed data, but you're able to, again, keeping those field notes, keeping that team communication, and I think going in as a team being prepared for what if something comes up in the qualitative that is, where a red flag or whatnot comes up. So being as a team kind of going into that process and saying, okay, we're going to be nimble to whatever comes across. But again, I think that's why I'm kind of looking at Rebecca, because we were talking about this, sometimes you don't need to do that full on qualitative to get your major themes to, again, identify the issues or what's going on well along the way.
And we have another question from Zoom. So Faith, did you want to ask your question?
Hello, yes, I have a question actually. I am just curious about, I couldn't get method 3 and method 4. What is the real difference?
We can't hear.
Hello.
Can you talk louder?
Right now? Yes.
Turn your
I'm sorry, but hello? Hello?
Yes.
We can hear you, it's just not very loud.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. And I just want to ask, I couldn't get really question, method 3 and method 4. What is the difference between method 3 and method 4? Can you just give...
I think he needs concurrent and embedded.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll take that one.
So the difference between the concurrent and the embedded. So again, they're very similar. So concurrent, though, to think about is kind of equal qualitative and quantitative, where embedded is one is sort of a subset of the other. Another way to think about it is an embedded, that's kind of secondary qualitative or quantitative data collection would not make sense without the context of that primary data. Whereas in a concurrent, they could, potentially stand alone. You're going to analyze and look at them together, but in an embedded, that secondary cannot be independent of that primary. Does that help?
Yeah, they can
Yes.
use.
And it was helpful. Thank you so much for answer.
Thank you.
And,
yeah. Also, you analyze them separately, then you analyze them together versus the embedded just kind of right together. Okay. I'm just going to mention for our future sessions, you may be asking yourself, so how do I actually mix these? Like you're saying, here's the design, collect this one, and then analyze them together. We, if you liked us and want to listen to us again, we have another session in February. Okay, you're going to have to wait a little while, but unless you want to meet with us, but is really analyzing mixed methods data. So what are ways that you actually mix data, and then how would you present that in a proposal so that you talk about how you're mixing your methods together. So we didn't cover that today, but we will plan to do that in the future.
All right. Any last quick questions?
I was actually going to make a comment.
Sure.
I don't know how many. So I just want to say something encouraging about the fact that I currently have 2 NIH-funded grants where we are doing sequential qualitative stuff after each RCT. And I'm just personally very encouraged that NIH now sees that as a viable method. It's 2 years ago, not so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you to our presenters. That was wonderful, very nice introduction to the designs. As I mentioned, this is a series. We do have 3 upcoming presentations that are more in-depth examples of actual studies, funded studies that have been done using one or more of these designs or in adaptation of these designs. So please come back. We meet the second Monday of each month, and we'll have several other boards investigators coming to talk about their projects and to give you a better sense of, well, what does it actually look like in practice? How do I do that? How might I talk about it? And then we'll have an analysis interpretation lecture from Jody and Megan in February. And then finally, Allie will cap us off along with Shauna Leary in March, I believe that is, giving some examples of how they've actually published papers using mixed methods. That's its own whole separate form of hard work. So thank you, everybody. Please complete your evaluations. You can fold them and put them in the back. Those on the phone, if you want to complete an evaluation, you can have a burning desire to tell us, send me an email. I'll email you with the evaluation form. But otherwise, thank you, everybody. Thank you to Allie and Jody, and thanks to everyone for participating today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Did you have a question, Russ?
No, I just said thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
No, apparently not.
Passed around.